In this video, we're talking about the top 5 things you need to consider when planning your detached garage project. Stay tuned. Hey there, Jake with JWK Design, helping families just like yours create their comfortable, modern home. Today we're talking about detached garages. I'm just at a project that I finished up about a month ago here, and this one was tricky. You can see it's only a one-stall garage, one client with one car, so that's all she needed, but to fit it on the site and you can get a sense of how tight it is to the fence line, we went through a few different design iterations to get the size and the spacing and the fit just right for her. So the first thing you want to consider, of course, is aesthetic. Does it match the aesthetic of the house? Do you want it to match the aesthetic of the house? Or do you want to set it off as a separate structure? Let's say it's going to be your workshop. Are you working on cars and you want it to have a more automotive feel? Do you want it to be a little more rustic because you want this kind of secluded getaway space? Do you want something a little more modern because you want to set it off on your property? In this case, she wanted to match the materials of the house pretty much one for one. So as you're looking at aesthetics, what's the balance and the rhythm of, in this case, moving from the lap siding to the shake look up on top in the gable? You want to look at your existing house and you want to make those decisions. You want to have that conversation with your designer or your architect or your design build contractor so that it makes sense at the end of the day. And the other piece of the aesthetics discussion is proportion. Not only the height of the structure, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the video. The overall height of the garage, yes, how it relates to the width, and how that relates to your garage door size. In this case, it's a standard 8x8 door, but you may need something wider. If you're one to keep your Yakima or Thule rack on top of your SUV or van all the time, you may want to look at a taller door. You may even want to go custom. If you're transporting your bikes on top of your car, well, you will have to go full custom or just pay attention. You of course need to consider access. Access with your car, of course. That's kind of the reason you're building the garage in the first place. In this case here, the straight shot driveway and the pad in the back was already existing. We just had to cut in new footings for the walls. So you need a clear path, and if your property kind of warrants that you need to be able to turn around, make a K-turn, or are you adding additional parking outside of the garage for when family or guests are there, you need to plan for that. Do you have the room for that? And then second, of course, is how you'll access the garage when you're not in your car. Do you want to have a separate door? I always think it's best practice to have a separate man door accessible from the front or the side, outside of your fenced in or your gated in area, say backyard. But in this case, she wanted a separate door out the back. She wanted to be able to go right out into the yard with potted plants or with seedlings, or to be able to grab tools, because her tool storage is all in the back of the garage there. All things to consider. To get into some of the more nitty-gritty, aka boring minutia that your designer or architect will deal with, let's head back to the office.
You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast.
Next are the activities. Of your garage. Yes, you're parking cars there, but how many? 1, 2, 3, 6? Are you storing bikes? Are you storing strollers, your lawn chairs, your beach gear, your lake gear, your tools? Do you need a rack system? Think about everything that you want to try to cram into this garage, and so many of us cram way too much into our garages. But you want to plan for that. You want to understand where wall systems may need to go, where shelving and cabinetry may need to go. You need to think about circulation in and around your vehicles and the day-to-day access that you're going to need to take out the trash, if that's how you take the trash out. Or can you fit the stroller in between the cars or around the garage door to get out to go for a walk? So again, in the case of this project, it was a one-car garage, but she wanted extra space for something of a potting bench, and she wanted room for storage, and she wanted access out the back directly into the yard with all that gardening stuff. So you need to plan ahead for that. So one thing I thought was interesting here, in our local code, City of Greenville, South Carolina, you're not allowed to build that detached garage before you build the actual house. So you couldn't go out and buy a piece of land, at least within city limits here, and you have to check with your local codes to use it as a storage unit until you build the house, or to store construction materials and equipment. You actually can't do that. The other thing in thinking about activities is that you actually can use your garage for your business. Only certain occupations. You can't store, say, a fleet of trucks or a fleet of landscaping equipment. Your garage also, in my case, can't be a retail space. You need to look at your codes to see which business types might be allowed if you are doing crafts or woodworking or metalworking, what have you. You may not be able to sell directly out of the garage, but rather simply use it for the production of your artwork or whatever widgets you're making, and then bring those off-sites for sale. Yeah, and as I'm scrolling through the code here, again, can't have a landscaping business or commercial greenhouse in a residential garage, can't have a barbershop or beauty salon, can't have a doctor's office, and you can't be a fortune teller. No psychic readings in the garage, please. Now the big one here, and why we needed to go through a couple of design exercises and talk to a couple of contractors and talk to the city, was that accessory structures are not allowed to be used as residences. You can't have an apartment over a garage, or an ADU, accessory dwelling unit as they're often called. Those aren't allowed in the city. Those would require a variance. Check with your local codes. So as you can see here in the first iteration of the design, we had a full loft upstairs. It actually had a full bathroom inside, as she was thinking about potentially having family stay there. Again, as that turned out, the city would not allow that, and she didn't want to push forward with a variance, so we scrapped this design. But there was a full second story with dormers here and a little deck out the back. There's an expanded deck, and it's a little more gracious of a structure, and it just met the height of the existing main house roof peak, which was all, again, allowed within allowable limits, but we were pushing the very boundaries there. We ended up not going with this design, instead opting for the single-story garage with a smaller loft storage only space that you saw earlier today. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in me doing another video specifically on ADUs. Of course, I can't speak to specific examples here in my work because I can't design those here, but if that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comments below. The next part of the puzzle that you absolutely need to know, and this is where your architect or designer or design build contractor really needs to show their expertise, is in setbacks. There's side yard setbacks, there's rear yard setbacks, there's setbacks from existing utilities, there's setbacks from your septic fields or your well access. All of those need to be first understood and potentially marked out, painted out, and then they need to be put onto the site plan when you go to pull a permit for your garage. Now, all of your setback information will be in your local code, whether that's your city or your county or your state, and it's typically listed in the accessory structure section. So as we dig into the site plan here on the computer, you can see we've got the existing house and the existing driveway, and we need to calculate all those in terms of the impervious area. And what I mean there is just how much surface deflects rainwater, deflects stormwater, as opposed to letting it soak into the ground. Because again, there's a cap that we need to maintain. Can't go more than 40% impervious coverage, at least within my city limits here, specific to yours again. So those all need to get calculated, and the concrete that we extend around to get into the side door and to get around to the backyard, those all need to be figured in. The coverage of the breezeway as we go up into the new screen porch that we've bumped off the house, that all gets factored in. And of course we've calculated the total square footage of all of that so that we are within range, we're well within range in this case. But those all need to be shown on a site plan in order to pull the building permit. Finally, you have to think about the sizing of your garage. Now, that's not just front, back, left to right, but you have to think about the overall height of the structure. In our case here, the maximum height that the garage could have been would be 25 feet, or it needs to be no higher than the main house, than the principal structure, as they call it here. So we actually went through two different exercises, and I kept it pretty much right at the peak of the existing house when we had that additional artist space or loft space up above. There's also a maximum square footage that most accessory structures can be. In this case, the garage couldn't be more than 50% of the area of the main house. And that breezeway that you saw earlier, it is also included in those calculations. Even though it's outside, even though it's exposed to the elements, it still counts. And they're looking at that in terms of the total impervious coverage as well. Now, that really wasn't a concern here because she didn't want a monstrous garage, but if you're dealing with a smaller, say a 2-bed, 1-bath, or 2-bed, 1.5 bath house built in the 60s, and you want to put a 2 or 3 car garage in the back, you may not be allowed to. If we're talking about your standard 2-car garage, quote unquote standard 2-car garage, I like to plan for a minimum of 24 feet by 24 feet inside dimension. And that's going to allow you kind of the minimum width to open both sides of your car doors, at least one car at a time, and give you space to walk around front, back, and both sides. And it gives you some room on the sidewalls to store your bikes or to hang your tools or what have you. And I like to see a minimum of a 9-foot ceiling in a garage. Now, if you can go vaulted, that allows you to hang more stuff up on the walls. Let's say you've got a lake kayak, you can stand it up on end and hang it from a hanger. Or you've got taller tools and you don't want to be scraping the ceiling every time you try to get your rakes and your shovels down. All things to think about. Again, plan ahead on how you want to use the garage and how you might best accommodate all that extra storage that I know we all need. The other things you want to consider when you're looking at aesthetics is your window placement. How are you spacing any windows in and around the garage? In this case, on the lower portion here, the left side, if you're looking in from the street, that's where her gardening supplies or potting bench are going to live, so she wanted natural light in there. She also wanted to be able to overwinter certain plants or to get seedlings started in the early spring. And then on this side, you also want to think about your light placement. Now, of course, your fans and the different light fixtures, those play into aesthetics, but it also comes into functionality. When you pull into your garage, you don't want to pull into a dark cave, especially in the middle of the winter, or you're fumbling with 10 bags of groceries, something like that. You want to plan out your lighting, plan out your fans if you have them. So I hope that was a hopeful overview of what you should be considering as you're starting to plan out that detached garage that you're looking to build. Again, you want to engage with your local architect or building designer or design build contractor, one that knows your specific local, county, state codes so that you can design and build it right the first time. If you have any other questions about garages or renovations, designing that new custom home, or getting the yard that you've always dreamed of, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. And until next time, see ya.